Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. I got to tell you something, people. The gentleman on my show was on a little under 5 years ago, and he's an accomplished actor and musician. But at that time, a little under 5 years ago, he said he was really going to start backing out of acting and concentrating on music. And you know, it's worked. Because I'll tell you, I also saw my memories a few days ago. I saw him in Philadelphia with his band Dogstar. It was a great show, and it was so lucky because Joanne and I were driving around, and the parking lot right across from Underground Arts was closed. And someone went in like $45 to park. I'm like, man, I don't want to pay. So I'm looking, and we found, thank God I have a small car. We found a spot. We walked down. We watched the show. We hung out with Rob after the show. And my guest is Rob Mailhouse. How you doing, Rob?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine. How are you doing?
Good. You know,
if you're only as hip as your guest, then you're in serious trouble.
Come on, dude. You're like the hippest guy around. You're a rock star. You know, I've been watching. I saw your Instagram when you were getting ready to perform at one of the festivals, and it is really amazing because I do remember because you've had a successful career as an actor. You know, you were in a TV series. You were I'm sure you're getting residuals from the Christmas movie right now, but you had said that you wanted to pull away and concentrate on more music. And I remember during the pandemic, you would play the keyboard on your patio. And I always enjoyed that. So isn't it weird when you think about it? You know, you were an actor and you said you wanted to pull away, and your musician dreams have somewhat pretty much come true, right?
You know, ever since I was a little boy, all I wanted to do was play the drums. I mean, I think it was the first thing right from nursery school. There was this kid in nursery. I can't remember what I did 2 weeks ago, but I can remember nursery school for some reason. And I even remember this kid's name, Dave Nordlander. And we used to pretend we were, the Beatles. My sisters were 6 years older than me, so I got a lot of the hand-me-down records. So I got to see, all the Beatles and all the Beatles memorabilia and all the stuff. And for me, that was just a game changer right at the time, when the country was sort of going through a really difficult time with, I was too young to know this, but apparently, this assassination of Kennedy and all these people were getting, murdered. And the country was really low. And then the Beatles come over on the Ed Sullivan Show and just sort of lifts the whole country out of this gloom. And being a young boy, I didn't experience the gloom because I was too young to understand what that was. I was just a kid playing around in the neighborhood. But yeah, so I experienced all the joy, so I got all the Beatles. So as an American, watching TV as a kid, seeing all that stuff, I got introduced, I think you're going to laugh at this, but the Monkees. So in nursery school, I was obsessed with the Monkees because that's what came on television. And it was wildly entertaining, clearly. And those guys had the best personalities, Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones and, Mike Nesbitt and Peter Tork. And who knew, I know they get a lot of gruff about, well, maybe they didn't, they write all their music. But then again, Frank Sinatra didn't write all his music either. And he's a legend. And the music, later as I grew up, I found out that the music that was being written for them, obviously, the Monkees were some of the greatest writers from the Brill Building, Carole King, and the list just goes on, Neil Diamond. So for me, like, to get to roundabout way to your question was, I kind of wanted to do that first because that's what I was sort of born into, that kind of explosion. And then I think what normal parents do is they kind of discourage your kids from becoming, musicians or anything like that. And they think, oh, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. But I sort of, my whole life, that's what I wanted to do. And then, you grow up and you get pulled away and things change and you go to school, then you go to high school, then you go to college. And then it sort of drifted away from me. So the acting thing sort of was something that just sort of fell out. I ended up wanting to do that because I didn't know what else to do. And I started doing plays and theater and in DC. But that thing that you're talking about, that first love, was like always at the back of my head. So So I started playing piano and when I was living in Manhattan and doing things solo because I couldn't figure out how to get a band together. So I learned the keyboards where I thought, oh, you can just do that by yourself and build a whole system, get a drum machine and a keyboard. And so I started doing that. And then, my life completely changed when in 1990 when I walked into this Gelson's and met Keanu. And then he had a house up in Beechwood Canyon and musical gear in there and a drum set that was someone else's drum set. And he was like, sit down and, let's bang it out. So, I'm like late 20s and I had got my second chance to give it a go. And that's so I just jumped at that.
What made you, though, as a kid, gravitate towards the drums? Because my older brother played drums. And growing up, it was a pain in the ass because they had him in the den. And it was loud. I wanted to watch TV. And my brother would be practicing. So they said, oh, we're going to put him down the basement. But we had a basement that flooded because we had a sump up where our house was built. So we took my mom and dad, my dad took the ping pong table and put it together and put it as a riser for my brother's drums. So then I was pissed that he got the ping pong. But I sat there and I never know what gravitated him towards the drums. But I've interviewed so many drummers on the show. I mean, you said when you were younger, you and that guy in school wanted to play. But what made you choose the drums? Because looking back at it now, it's great. But I talk to drummers. It's always a pain in the ass because you got to lug all this shit around. I mean, so what made you choose the drums?
It's funny because we always had a piano in our house and no one really played it except for my grandmother. So it was always sort of sitting in the, back of the room there. And I would, my grandfather played the organ. And so I thought, oh, that's cool. But I think it goes back to just being like a young kid and watching television and seeing, I saw A Hard Day's Night, the movie A Hard Day's Night, which I thought was the greatest. I still think it's one of the most incredible films ever made because it sort of introduces us not just another Beatle movie, but the direction of it, the handheld camera, and also the first introduction to like a music video, I assume, in the 60s. And I just fell in love with those personalities, and in particular Ringo Starr. I just thought he was the coolest guy on the planet, and it was a physical thing, when you're a little kid, you like sports teams, you don't know why you like them, then you realize because you like their helmets, like the football team, like, oh, I like the Eagles, their helmets, or the Vikings, and you just fall in love with their gear instead of like who they are or where they're from. And for me, I fell in love with Ringo Starr's drum set. I just looked at that Black Oyster Pearl wrap that he had, and so I asked my dad, I was like, can I get some drums? And any normal parent would just say, are you out of your mind? Because, they won't get any sleep. So they sort of hemmed and hawed a bit. But when I got some drumsticks, I'd start banging them on the piano keys when I was a kid, and I was chipping the keys because I loved. And my dad was like, okay, wait, we got to get him a drum set. So they got me like a $30 drum set or something at Kmart or whatever, and I tried to play it, and I just sort of shelved it for a bit. And but I think to answer your question, honestly, it was, when you listen to music yourself, like you gravitate toward an instrument. And I think for me, I was sort of gravitating towards bass and drums, and I wasn't skilled enough to play the bass, but the beats, I was gravitating to that. And then, of course, honestly, the Monkees, they played a huge part of a young person's development, seeing the personality of Mickey Dolenz and then Ringo Starr. And then all of a sudden the Rolling Stones come and there's Charlie Watts, this cool guy behind a drum kit. And I just thought these drummer guys. And then when I was little and someone played a Who album and I looked at Keith Moon and John Bonham, I was like, that's it. Those are the guys. Those are the people that I sort of gravitated to at concerts when I went to see. I would always gravitate towards that. So it was a really long journey. It took me a really long time to sort of just get the basics down, but I stuck with it.
We're going to get back to Dogstar, but there's a question I always like to ask drummers. My friend Rich Redman, who plays with Jason Aldean, we were at his concert, and I asked him backstage, okay, 3 songs you have a choice to play the drums on. I'm giving you 3 songs, Okay, I'm going to tell you what they are. Because when I listen to them when I'm driving, because I can't play drums, I have no musical talent, but I'm just fascinated by it. And they're just so different. Queen, Fat Bottom Girls, Rush, Tom Sawyer, Dire Straits, Money for Nothing. Which would you want to play and why?
I kind of, I mean, those are all incredible drummers, you're mentioning. Um, you know, I sort of would gravitate for me towards the Dire Straits just because I think I'm more of a lyrical drummer. Like I sort of hang my hat more around the vocal, and I really enjoyed Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits. So I think for me that would be more of a fit. I'm just not quite skilled enough for Queen or Rush. That's like another level of an area that I'm just not familiar with. That kind of stuff, like the Steve Gadds of the world. They're just on other levels. Geniuses. And but for musically attraction, I think I would be attracted to anything from Dire Straits.
So, okay, Dogstar. No,
I have
because
no idea.
I always sit there. No, it's just no, because I listen to them and they're so different, but then they're just like Queen, Fat Bottom Girls, and it just I'm the worst making.
You
Musical
mentioned it's
presence.
funny you mentioned Queen and you mentioned Rush, and those are two. Well, one of the drummers, Queen, sings and is very lyrical, and Rush, that drummer, he wrote most of that music for that band, a lot of it. So it's interesting you mentioned those two bands. Those are like really involved,
Because
like
when
drummers.
when I hear them though, I just go, man, that is so cool. It's one of those things when you drive, it's one of those things like when you hear Steve Miller Take the Money Run, you always clap your hands. It's just it's from the thing you do. But okay, so we're gonna go back to 1990. This is when you said you met Keanu. Now you were in Hollywood for how long?
I was living in Manhattan, so I sort of came out there because I just wanted some more space. I'm from Connecticut, and I lived in D.C. I went to college there, and so the normal thing to do is to move, if you can, and back then you could afford to, is to go to Manhattan to try to realize whatever it is that you want to do in the theater or acting and and it just seemed like the right place. So I spent 5 years there. And then I was like, oh, I need to get out of here. I need some space. And I was sort of hitting a dead end. So I just went out there and got a place and didn't know a single person, just some other friends that wanted to come with me, in a car from Connecticut or New York. So that was our base. And then honestly, it was a weird how I met him. I was just going to get some cereal or some milk or I don't know, some cheese at Gelson's, and I had a bunch of hockey buddies. So I guess I had a Detroit Red Wings T-shirt on, and he approached me and he said, "Do you play hockey?" And I was like, "I do. I'm in a hockey club, and I'm not very good."
Did you know
but
who he was though? I mean, you knew.
I know I did because he had done 1991 or so. I mean, he'd done some films, so I clearly knew he was, he wasn't, what became,
Right.
I think he'd Bill and Ted, and I don't think he had done Point Break yet. No, I don't think he had, because I remember throwing the football with him on that one, and we used to mess around with that. But yeah, and then when I first met him, we first started to get together. Like wow, I was like, you're really, really good bass player. He's like, no, I'm not. I was like, yeah, you kind of are. You kind of remind me of like Peter Hook from Joy Division, or you have this like melody. So it was really fun to play with him, and it still is. And he's gotten even better. And so that's how I learned. I mean, I basically really learned drums with him, just thousands of hours, just up at his house, just
So when you
just banging on
decide
the drums.
when you decide to sit there and say we're gonna make a band together, we're gonna, because I said I saw you guys, I waited on you guys at the Super Bowl in San Diego years ago. But but your first album came out in '96. So how did you go about getting the band formulated? Because I believe you had a different lead singer than you have now. You have a different guy than Bret in the beginning, or no?
Yeah, we did. This guy Greg, and he was my roommate in New York's. They went to college together with him, and I went to high school with this kid Morgan, and he would hang out at the Loft in Manhattan, and he just was going to move out here too, and so I was like, hey, you want to come up and play? And so he did, and he was committed and to doing that. So it was a fun kind of like a punkier version, and Greg, yeah, he had good taste in music, and but it, we were just going in a different area, and then we met Bret and became a four piece, and but everything that we recorded record wise, it was with Bret, yeah. So, but it was really fun, and it all worked out in an interesting way, and I think we all have pretty good memories of all of it. But yeah, it was just a friendship thing, and.
But how did you get the record deal? I mean, did you sit there and distinctively go after a record deal, or was because Keanu was known, it got a little bit? I mean, how did that happen? Because you put an album out, so in '96, as I said.
We didn't really know what we were doing, and I guess this girl, Chris Haynes, lovely person, we're still in touch with. She came to our show in Colorado, and she was working for a company called Zoo Records. This guy Lou Malia was a really lovely guy, and she just pulled us in. We were just going to record something ourselves, and she just got us with Lou, and we made this record. And then that I think it was Zoo Records. I think Matthew Sweet was on there, and then the record company sort of folded out. It just, so by the time our record never really came. It just boom, and then it got bought out by another company, and then we tried to make a record with them, and then they went kaput. So it was sort of like, oh God, we had really bad luck with that, and there was, so that wasn't really, it's kind of partially why we kind of stopped and then restarted. But the record business, that, as you know, it's a kind of a boring conversation. I'm sure nobody wants to hear about it. It's just so different, unless you're like a super duper pop star, or it's very exclusive, and artists today, you don't necessarily need that anymore. So, which is great. It's a double-edged sword. But so we have our own label now, and we do it ourselves, and we're the we own everything, and it's really nice.
So you guys didn't play for a long time. You didn't play for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, I was thinking about this earlier today. Do you think, and this is just ironic, as I said earlier, that you wanted to get out of acting. Did you guys start playing again because there was the SAG strike and Keanu couldn't work? I mean, how did you do this? I mean, it would make sense because all of a sudden, but so how did you end up becoming where you're this touring band? I mean, you were just in Dubai. I see you playing festivals. I saw you guys in Philly. What was the point when you came out with the new album? Was it because of the strike you guys started calling each other, or how did you re-spark the interest? Because and as I said, I talked to you 5 years ago, and we mentioned Dogstar, but Dogstar, it wasn't like you guys were formed then. You said, oh yeah, maybe down the road we'll have an album or something like that. So I want to trace the steps because it's interesting. Because as I said earlier, it's great for you because you're getting to live your ultimate dream when you were younger, what you wanted to do. But what was the course of action to getting Dogstar, Dogstar 2.0? Because you guys are like, all of a sudden you're everywhere. What happened?
Around that time, I guess around maybe like 11 or 12 years ago, I was like, I had all these cassettes and high 8 videos of all the stuff we did in the 90s, and all my friends were giving me whatever they had. And we thought, I go, oh, let's make a little documentary or something. So I started accumulating all this stuff, and we kind of did sort of make something, but we decided it didn't really fit what we wanted to share. So it was more of a personal document. And that's when I was like, wow, we were really on to something, but it's almost like we were like from the wrong time, we were like storytelling, but yet it was like grungy, angry, sort of aggressive stuff. And then we were sort of writing these like sort of storytelling songs, and I really sort of fell in love with it again. So then we started getting together in around 2010, 2011, just playing a little bit. And I'd never really stopped playing drums because I had formed another band after that for a few years. And then with my buddy Todd Spar, from the Cave Dogs, we had a thing going, And so I was continuing my music and stuff, but always, Keanu would always come over. We'd always do a bass and drum jam or have friends come over and do that. But then I think it was when the pandemic hit, everyone really wanted it. It sort of focused everyone. When you're sitting at home and the music is such a beautiful outlet, whether you're listening to it or playing it, and I think that's true for a lot of people across the world. Their escape was music, and I think that's when we really sort of decided, like, let's give it a go. And so we committed to a real writing session, and we just stuck it out. We spent like 12-hour days for like 3 weeks, and we came up with that record.
What was your quick? What was your writing session? What was were you lyrics? How did you guys write together? Because was it just you and Keanu, or was it all three of you? Because you always hear
all three. Yeah.
Because you always hear, it's funny. Everyone talks about Lennon and McCartney, great, but no one really brings up like Mick and Keith. And they have so many great songs, but no one ever, like, I think everyone thinks Keith's like this major drug addict and Mick, like, I don't think they ever got credit. I mean, usually, and then even like the Toxic Twins, Joe Perry and Steven Tyler. It's so funny, like, it's for two people. It seems like there's a lot of songwriters who are 2 or 4. You don't really hear 3 because you think, like, with the Police, I think Sting wrote most of it. You said with Rush, you said it was probably Neil and Geddy Lee. But what is it like for 3 people writing? Because I can understand, like, with 2, like, I interviewed Andrew Farris from INXS. He wrote the music. Michael Hutchins wrote the lyrics. Okay? So for you, how was the breakdown? And did you guys flip-flop? And was it if 2 liked it, would play, or you would put it on the album, or was it if it had to be unanimous? But what was your whole writing process for all 3 of you? I mean, during the pandemic, of course, you may have been in the same room with masks. You may not have been. You just been sending stuff. But what was the process? Because it fascinates me when 3 guys sit down and they just start writing together.
In the past, we'd all bring in ideas, and sometimes Bret would bring in songs, and Keanu would bring in riffs. And this time it was, we tried to do it that way, like I'd sit down at the piano, have some ideas, but we just realized, all right, we wanted a different sound. So this time around, Keanu really came in with a ton of bass lines, or people call them riffs, but just melody pieces that would be sounded like verses to a song. Not necessarily the choruses, the pre-chorus, but just like a verse, like a beautiful, like a bass verse. And so then Bret would sort of weave his guitar around that, and then together those two would come up with a good, with a chorus or pre-chorus. And then Bret writes all the lyrics, at a later time or whatever, whenever he can or as he's going. And then we would sort of jam out these pieces, and then sort of arrange and sort of vote on them. Or we do this thing called the next day test. Like you think it's great, and then you come in 2 days later and you listen to it on the iPhone and you go, oh God, that was terrible. Or that sounds like another band, or, oh, let's go revisit that. So this time along, with the technology so easy, not using a cassette or having the iPhone and voice record and sharing, it's so much easier. If you have an inspiration, you just press a button and you can get get it going and share it and stuff like that. So we had separate ideas, but I think the best of the songs on this new album, or the album we did, was when we all sort of came together and sort of crafted things. But it's Keanu, and Keanu's he's so full of melody, and Bret's really good adapting at any style, and he's also really lyrical as well, and so the two of them really work really well together, and I feel like I'm kind of sort of the human Shazam of the group. I'll be like, no, we can't do that. That sounds like something else, or wait, that's too much like that. Or
well, it's good you do that. It's good you do that because you don't want anything to sound like it. And so the album, Somewhere Between the Power Lines and Palm Trees, is that like Beverly Hills adjacent? I mean, where is where?
I think Bret was Airbnb being a place when he was recording. We recorded in Glassell Park and with Dave Trumfio, and I guess everywhere in Silver Lake, you see these beautiful palm trees, and then there's just power lines, and it's just where he was staying at the reservoir was drained and everything. He thought he was going to be in this beautiful reservoir, and they had drained it, and they just every day you look up and you see the coyotes and the palm trees and then the power lines, and he's just like, he came up with that title. It really makes a lot of sense.
And it makes sense if you
East
live,
LA.
If you live there. Now, okay, so you have the album. So when do you start to go on tour? Because when I talked to you after your show, when you guys started the tour, you were gaining momentum. Like, you were playing places at the end that you booked in the beginning that if you had booked like DC or whatever, middle of the tour, you would have been playing a bigger venue. So when you decided to tour, how do you go about it? And is it something that, the funny thing is with Dogstar is you don't promote, Dogstar with Keanu Reeves, which is great because you're a band. And some people will come, and I talk to different actors who are comics, and they see them on their show, and then they come to see them do comedy, like, well, wait, we didn't get wait a second. Like, this wasn't the character. It's like, no, because I'm a comedian. But what was it, I mean, when you started to tour, what were your expectations? And I'm sure you didn't expect to, like, playing in these huge festivals, and I saw the picture in front of 100, whatever, 50, 60, 70,000 people. But when you put the tour together, what were your expectations? Did you say, we're just going to go, we're going to be, did you have a bus? How did you guys get around? Did you do like the old school, like, hey, let's get us in a station wagon? Which you guys don't have to because you've all made money in your careers. But what made you decide to tour, and how did you piece it together?
Well, oddly enough, the three of us love playing and touring and traveling, which is weird because you talk to a lot of musicians and they're just like, oh, the road, it's tough. And I understand that, but I don't know what it is. I'm just so lucky to be able to be in a band with other guys that actually like doing that. So at first we just decided, we have to do something. We have to play somewhere. So we started booking clubs, just all around California. We just went up the coast of California and did like clubs, clubs. And then, we didn't know, what the reception would be like or how many people would come see us. So, our first show, we did this place called Gold Diggers, 125 of our friends. And then we did like 300, then we did 400. And then we weren't sure, even the promoters weren't sure. They're just like, we don't know. Like, we don't know where to put them. I was like, well, we'll tell you. We don't want to be in anything big. We want to be in a club. And so we started booking those things. And then they just started, we have a really good booking agent. It's very helpful, and we've personal friends of ours for a long time. And our managers, Q Prime, are just they're just fun human beings that are just our friends now. And they, you're right. It was so weird. We didn't know. So the first batch was that, and then we graduated to like small theaters, and then it seemed like, okay, wait a minute, that might be a little too big. We're trying to find out, where we were. And so we prefer to be in the smaller place, because, we just like to play. And then we just sort of waited to see what would dictate, what people would want. And then we went to Europe and everything changed because Europe was completely different. For some reason, they knew all the songs. They were singing all the lyrics. Like, I'm playing shows, I'm looking out, I'm like, they know these songs. It's just crazy. I didn't understand that. So it was really different over there. And then, of course, we got to tag along and play, the afternoon spot at a festival for the 25,000 people, where Green Day was headlining or, opening up for, other bands and stuff. And then we got some real good love from other musicians, which meant a lot to us.
Like who?
And that Steven Tyler came to see us at the Troubadour, and he was very complimentary. We did we did a charity thing with Will Ferrell at the Greek, and a lot of the musicians there were just really, they were just really nice and complimentary. Mike McCready sort of took us under his wing, and we did some covers with him. And then he told Eddie about us, and Eddie invited us to the Ohana Festival that they do every year. And I couldn't have been, it was like a dream come true. And he watched our set, and he's like, I can't believe you guys are just three. There's someone else somewhere under the stage. I was like, no, it's just the three of us. So he kind of liked our old stripped down style, and he was very kind to us and all those guys. So it's nice to get support from people that you admire that are, they're just legendary, and it really helped give us a lot of confidence. When your peers are like, or were like seeing that we worked hard. They could tell that we didn't just come out. They could tell that we were slugging it out for years in the garage. I mean, you could tell. They just knew. They're like, you guys are working your ass off.
Well, you mentioned,
so they got it. Yeah.
You mentioned Mike McCready, and I tell people this, and you sit there and the guitar solo in Alive by Pearl Jam is one of the best guitar solos that doesn't get the credit. And it's just like 25 to 6 or 4 by Chicago. Amazing guitar solo by
Terry Cat. Cat.
But Mike McCready in Alive, that guitar solo is just, it's Mike McCready's the guitarist for Pearl Jam, the lead guitarist, right?
Yeah, well, they have a couple of guitar
him and Stone, I think so.
That band.
He plays that.
Yeah, and also Eddie plays great as well. Yeah, but you're right. No, it's they're at it, and they're actually they're sounding as good as ever now, which is bizarre. Well, no, it isn't bizarre. That's exactly the way it should be. They're like, the last time I saw them, it was incredible at the Hana Festival. They just played, and they couldn't be nicer. I mean, Eddie. I mean, he's like this. That gave us. It was just really nice to cap that. That was sort of the end of our big tour.
Now,
that was really nice.
As you're playing, you're going from the clubs to the theaters, and then Europe, and these big venues. How does it affect the band in the way you're playing? Because when you're playing in a club, it's smaller, and it's something that all of a sudden you're getting bigger, and you're playing, and you have to. Well, the drummer, you're the show. You have to use the stage. You have to, everything. You have to play bigger. So all of a sudden, you go from a club and you're paying $25,000. I mean, how do you play bigger? Like I said, my friend Rich from Maldine, he's played with him forever, and so he's still, he has flames shooting up. He just learned. You learn because you guys are always up on the riser. He always takes great pictures. Like the drummer is higher up, so you see. But how do you, as a band, acclimate to this huge crowd? Because it's like you can probably only see, you can't see everybody. You can only see the front part. But I mean, when your view do you feel a difference playing in front of 25,000 than playing like we saw you at Underground Arts might hold 380, 400, and everyone's close to the stage and they're pushing, and we stood more in the back because we were old and we're not getting involved with that stuff. But how do you adapt to that, and then also playing off each other, because you're going to get applause breaks. It's different. You're going to get that reaction. So how long did it take you guys to mesh into playing bigger venues?
It's a great question. Like most musicians will tell you, I mean, I'm assuming they will, that they enjoy playing the small venues. I mean, because that's A, where they started, and B, there's like that relationship with that crowd that you have that it's really hard to have maybe at a festival, because they're so far away or for whatever reason, but there's something magical. And as as an audience member, like, would you rather see the Pixies, at Toad's Place in New Haven with 500 people, or, in front of like 20,000, or, you know what I'm saying? It's like, of course, as an audience member, you'd rather see the Rolling Stones or, whatever, any band in a smaller, more intimate area. So I think it's hard to, I like them both, but this is sort of like a nerdy, geeky answer. In the old days, and still to this day, bands, they have monitor systems like wedges, or the old days it was just wedges. Or with the Beatles, they didn't have any monitors, but wedges on the stage where you can hear yourself. And so when you play venue to venue, the sound on stage was always different. And sometimes it was awful and horrible, and sometimes you couldn't hear anything. Other times it was perfect. But it was night to night. It was just insane. So, 20 years ago or so, they came up with the inner ears, which are basically isolation ears, and your whole monitor system now is through your ears. So whether you're playing at a small club or in front of 20,000 people, the sound in your ear is identical. So it's because it's that in-case monitor system. Not all bands use those. Some musicians hate inner ears, and others, love them, like me, because A, they save your hearing, and then B, every night it's the exact same sound, except for some ambient tones that you might pick up from a club, which you can kind of control. So it gives you more confidence knowing, because it almost feels like you're in a recording studio because you wear headphones. So when that technology came along, it basically saved me, first of all. Now, Bret and Keanu, they were really late to the ears and were kind of like, no. But once they got them and got used to them, they're just like, oh my God, I can't believe. Well, maybe, bass players, it's a little different. But for Bret, if you're singing, you want to be on pitch, you want to be on key. And, if you're just singing with monitors blasting, it's really hard to do that. But when he wears the ears, he sings like he's in a recording studio. So I think that sort of system that we got, this Allen and Heath system from England, geeking out a bit, that encased monitor system, it really changed our lives. So it doesn't affect the front of the house. That sound man out there does that. But what we hear while we're on stage, so the fact that it's consistent each night, it gives you a lot of confidence. Now, that being said, when you see 20,000 people, it's frightening, it can be frightening. So, but when you see them all smiling, and having a good time, then you realize, what am I scared about? These people are there to have fun. They're not there to it's not like we're going to a stoning or something, or or going to like a rally, or, they're kind of rooting for you. They really are. No one's like wanting you to fail. So once you get that sort of out of your system, and also nerves are good. It's good to have that. If you're not a little nervous or a little something, I think there's something wrong with you. You're dead if you're not nervous. And then if you use those nerves in a good way, then you get that adrenaline, and that's what kind of elevates the performance. So yeah, it's kind of it's that.
Well, you mentioned New Haven. Now, I know you're a guy from Connecticut, and I ran into this couple at a networking event, and she's from New Haven, and we had a talk, and you tell me, in your own words, what makes New Haven pizza so great? Everyone raves, and there's some place in New Haven supposed to be the best. I forgot. She told me. I forget what it was. But what is, because I know you're a big foodie, what's the difference between New Haven pizza and all the other pizza?
It's New Haven pizza. I think somewhere in the 1920s, there's a lot of Italian Americans settling in New Haven. They come through New York, whatever, Ellis Island and Manhattan, and then there's a port there. So a lot of Italian Americans from Naples, they just happened to settle in this area. And then what they did was they built these brick ovens. And this guy, Frank Pepe, in 1927 or so, he built this brick oven pizza place. And it's like there was modern pizza, which is still there, Frank Pepe, which is still there, and Sally's, which is still there. Obviously, the owners are long gone. And Zupardi's, and there's a few others. And I think the common thread is that they were all bakers. They're all bread makers. And then they do this brick oven, which is like a char. It's like a thin charred, which some people would say, it looks a little burnt, which it's like a beautiful bubble in a crust. And it's like a crispiness to it. And, they start out with tomato pie, which Sally's was famous for, which is basically tomato sauce and crispy bread. And I think that New Haven style pizza really took off. Then the white clam pizza from Pepe's, that's another one. And then over the generations, I don't know how they've done it, but they've kept it like consistently delicious throughout all those years. And I think a difference from New York difference is the New Haven style pizza, the bottom is like a lot of cornmeal, and it's like a black. You get this like on your hands. You get this like sort of like black specks of burnt stuff, and your hands are all like crunchy from the bottom crust. And New Haven, I mean, in New York, I don't see that as much, but in Brooklyn, there's some places. But I understand now. I think there's good pizza everywhere in America now. Like it really is. Remember when we didn't have good coffee, and we didn't have, we never, and now we have some of the best coffee that rivals Europe, I think. But so now I think that's happening with pizza too, as well. Even Los Angeles, they're just sort of getting that idea of that the Naples style.
I'm gonna piss people off from L.A., but I'm gonna tell you the pizza.
New Jersey has great pizza.
Yeah, but I'm gonna tell you the pizza I always thought was New Jersey does a great pizza. There's two places, like 5 places right near me, but the place in L.A. and I always thought it was overrated. My friends who weren't from the East Coast, it was great. Casa Bianca. I thought it was just average pizza. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's in Eagle Rock. Casa Bianca was like this legendary place.
Yeah, I've been there.
And I was like, it's okay. It was very greasy. Yeah. Like, you don't know anything about pizza. I'm like, you grew up in L.A. You have this and you have Mulberry Street. That's all you have.
Yeah, well, we have Pizza Bianca. We have some good stuff, and there's a lot of good Detroit style pizza here called Quarter Sheets, which is some of the best. It's just incredible. That Detroit style pizza is more like a square pan. I mean the pan where they would put like motor parts in it. It's just like a square. It's like not like a Sicilian or a deep dish Chicago, but it's like a little crispier and thinner. But it's a Detroit style, which is really amazing. Somewhat like a Sicilian style, but it's really popular here.
Now touring the world.
Chris Bianco, that's his name. That's another guy downtown.
So touring, because you guys just toured all Europe, and I remember you went to Croatia, and I had told you have to try to get the cuttlefish risotto because it's their specialty. But what was it like touring in Europe? Were you treated like rock stars? What food was the best? I mean, did people, because of course, if you guys go out together, everyone in the world knows who Keanu is. I mean, if you don't know who Keanu Reeves is, where have you been for the last 30 years? But what was it like when you guys toured together? Because it must have brought a lot of attention sometimes where you guys are just musicians. You probably don't want that attention. But what was it like touring? And then where was some of the best food? Because you're the foodie. You always talk about your food.
I was really lucky. It's funny. I went to a prep school and the food was so bad, and so that's how I became, interested in food, because I was like suffered through 4 years of like this. And then my stepdad was a gourmet chef. I mean, he in his spare time cooking clubs, and he took me to cooking schools, and so I kind of learned by him. And so over the years, I've always been, looking out for the guys, trying to find wherever we go, trying to do the research. Back in the day it was a Zagat guide, and now it's your iPhone, and there's Eater and all sorts of things, Michelin, that you could use to get fun in not expensive food. It doesn't have to be good food. Doesn't have to be expensive. It could be $3, for an incredibly delicious, taco or whatever. But so I think, we're all three of us are different. We all have completely different, food situation, and same with our crew. And also when you're on the road, the most important thing is like trying to get some sleep, and you're just trying to figure out, oh my God, how am I going to, so you try to eat on the run. But what I would do is, in any city I'd go to, that's the first thing I would do. I would just try to figure out when I can go grab something, And sometimes the guys would come, but more often than not, I was either by myself or with a crew member or just a friend that I know in Europe I'd meet with. And like waking up in Paris and sort of wandering the streets at like 7 a.m. looking for a croissant, a cup of coffee. That to me, that was just really romantic. Going to the Rodin Museum and then maybe going out for lunch. But I had really good food in Amsterdam and London. Remember when England was known for like crappy food? Remember like the English food? Now it's like some of the best food I've ever had.
It's true. People say that. Because everyone just
incredible.
thought of it as fish and chips. They thought it was that, but then no one
Yeah,
knew. Like I
which
had a
I
friend
love.
from London who would say there was a lot of curry there. It was one of the
Yes.
original. But people always just thought mushy peas, fish and chips, blood sausage. And
Right.
they never really examined it. And it's funny though because I hear England is culinary wise, it's great right now.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, they got everything. They have they're in England, so they have like all the farms and all the vegetables and everything, and this whole new generation of 20 somethings and 30 somethings, and they're just like, you know what, we can change this, and they did. And then, like you said, the ethnicity of London, like which I love about Los Angeles. But in London, are you kidding me? I mean, that's everyone knows London has great Indian food, but it's even elevated to another level now. We went to this place called BB. It was incredible. And then there's Dishoom's and all these fun places, Lyle's, and so the food was great. And then stuff just sort of like wandering around northern Italy in a town, this teeny tiny town in Brescia, and just sort of taking a back alley and stumbling across a place that had some mortadella and some just little pizza and you're right. I just love wandering around, kind of like Anthony Bourdain, and not really knowing, and just sort of wandering around and just asking questions and talking to people. And in Bologna, we did have a crew meal, and we really had a lovely pasta dinner there in Bologna and some. Yeah.
You did a lot of Europe, but now you were just in Dubai. How did that happen? And I don't even really know a lot about Dubai. But I know it's a lot of money and a lot of skyscrapers. But you guys had a concert in Dubai. What was that about?
It was one of those, it was just like a private event that we went to, and it was a private event, and there was a lot of acts there. The Gypsy Kings. I think we were one of like 15 acts at the Atlantis Hotel there, and. Yeah, we were just part of a long line of entertainment, and we just said, yeah, we'll go, and it was a lovely time, and we were only there for a few days, and it was nice. I got to swim off the Persian Gulf, which I never in my life thought I would end up doing, and it was just an experience, another experience. Yeah.
Here's a question I have for you. I always wonder, okay, you guys, you're getting bigger, and we are in a world where there's a lot of haters, okay? And I'm sure there's people who are going to be like, never listen to your music, but they'd be like, oh, yeah, why would we listen to a band with Keanu? It's like Michael C. Hall. Michael C. Hall and his band were on my show, and from Dexter. And, they probably get some, like, we want to see Dexter sing. They expect Dexter. Like, do you guys get any... Do you think unwarranted hate just because someone hadn't heard you and someone's like, oh, I thought this movie sucked. Why would I go see Keanu? Because that's the problem with entertainment now. There are a lot of people like that. Like, people just want to hate. They don't want to listen. And I mean, have you run into any of that? Because it sucks for artists sometimes now because everyone's a fucking critic. And even when they haven't heard anything. I had a guy, when I lived stand this guy, he was like 60, and he always wore shorts and a t-shirts, and wore his hairs and his glasses in the back of his head, and he called himself the Machine. What an asshole. So, but he sits there, and one day we're at a bar, and he's like, yeah, man, fucking Springsteen sucks. And he's trying to get all wear that tight clothes. I'm like, well, dude, Springsteen's like 60, by the time, like 60-something, he's ripped. And I was like, and Springsteen doesn't suck. But he didn't really listen to music, but everyone's a critic. Have you guys run into that all? Just because people just think, oh, because Keanu's in the band, it's the old nepotism thing. Oh, they're only doing this because, they can get in there. And even though you guys, that's not the reason, and you said you've been working your ass off, I mean, do you get some unwarranted hate ever?
Oh, my! First of all, 6 Feet Under, Michael C. Hall. Come on, he's a great actor. I think that was more true in the 90s. because in the 90s, actors weren't really allowed to leave their lane, and play music. But musicians, it was okay for them to leave their lane and do acting. Like no one scoffed at when David Bowie would do a film, or some of those phenomenal musicians, legendary like David. Other musicians would appear. No one, but if an actor tried to play music, it was like it was not good. So there was a lot. But in this time around, I that hasn't been the case. Not only that, I don't feel there's any ageism. Like I see, like I'll look out in the crowd and I'll see, 18-year-olds and 60-year-olds. Like I'll see like a wide variety of, and split too, men and women, which was, different in the 90s. So I think that was more back in the day. And but we have not experienced that. We were maybe expecting a little of that because we'd had experienced that in the 90s. And it didn't bother us. We were growing, and some of it was, warranted. We didn't get to fall on our face in private, which, because when you play out, you should be able to well, maybe that's not true. Once you decide to play out, you're playing out. But it's nice to be sort of play out. Like, first of all, like when we first played, we played a small club called Raji's here, and Weezer, we played with Weezer, and nobody knew. There was like 60 people there. No one knew who Weezer was, and I don't think some people knew who we were, only because of, Keanu at the time. But Weezer, they were fantastic, but yet they weren't being maybe judged like we were because of who we had in the band, which we've dealt with that, and that makes us just work harder, so we can, and it's okay. We don't mind the judgment, we don't, it doesn't bother us anymore, because we just know that if we work our ass off and if we like it, that's totally fine, I mean, I don't like anchovies, but I'm not like a hater on it. I'm not running around trying to ban anchovies. But I mean,
it's funny. You said you played
the Weezer thing.
Yeah,
yes, because I'll tail back to the Weezer thing. So all these years later, last year, they called us up, guys. We played with you guys at this small club in 19 something. And would you like to open up for us before we go on tour at a small club in Highland Park called the Lodge Room, which is a brilliant club? And I almost started, I was like crying. I was like, yes. And so we did. And those guys they were so nice to us. It couldn't have been a more fun night. It was a magical night. And so that was a beautiful button to a really long, and those guys became, legendary musicians, and rightfully so,
You mentioned Raji's, and I know there was an upstairs of Raji's. It was down on Hollywood and Western, I think. No, down. And they had these vending machines. I remember because me and my buddy went in there to play pool, and upstairs, because I think it was below a single room only hotel.
Yes.
And so people would live up there, who are very down on their luck, and they could go in and get their beers and get like a frozen burrito, and there was like a microwave. That's how I remember at Raji's, because I was waiting tables at Planet Hollywood with my friend Joe Catone, and we went down there and we were playing pool, and these guys like, yeah, you look like some of those young Hollywood types. We're waiters, man. We're trying to be.
God.
But that was a great place. So what's the future of Dogstar? I mean, are you, well, first of all, for you, are you done with acting completely?
Yeah, I don't have any I'm not in, I don't have an age. I just, I really love it, and I loved it, and I would do it in a second, but it's just one of those things, like the scripts coming my way weren't, after a certain point, they weren't interesting, and I wasn't gonna, fight for it, or I'm not very good at that kind of networking thing, I'd rather just hide in my house and stuff. So, I suppose, in the day when I had some more momentum, I could have, said yes more. I was probably I said no too much to things, and I probably should have been more available to more experiences. But yeah, I know my first love has always been has always been music. So, um, and I'm just very grateful that we get to do this. So we're writing a new record, and we have 8 songs completed, and we need about 4 more. So tonight, we're going back into the studio to just keep writing, and in February we're going to record and come and this new record, and then hopefully in it'll it's a much different record. It's a little more faster and harder than the Power Lines record, which was very lush and sort of open, and it was who we were at the time, and this one's a little more Ramonesy, it's
So,
got a little more punch in it.
so how does that work with Keanu's schedule? Because Keanu, I'm sure, is booking as movies. I mean, he gets offers all the time. I mean, is he also saying, you know what, like for a tour per se, it's a matter of is Keanu like? Do you guys make like a long term plan? Like, we'll do the album, we'll hopefully go for a tour here, and then Keanu's like, good, I want to go on tour. I won't book anything because I'm sure first of all, Keanu's agents and managers must hate when he plays his acting. Must hate when he plays music because they're missing out on getting their percentage of him being in a movie. But I mean, so how does that work with you guys planning
I
like
mean,
a tour?
I don't think every actor, works like 300 days, 300 whatever a day, 200 days. You know what I mean? I think it's just, and this, especially with the industry the way it is now, unless you're on a television series, the work it's like 3 months here or 6 months here. So I think for him, um, he's the most gung ho. He's been the biggest cheerleader of Dogstar. Like he's been like he's like we call him the whip cracker. It used to be maybe you know all 3 of us or Bret or now it's Keanu. He's like become like a leader of in many ways. Certainly with like I was mentioning earlier before with the writing and the verses, and he's really responsible for a lot of the tempos and the style of the music. All 3 of us clearly, but he's been really. Yeah, I would say that he's kind of he's the one that's really he's so excited about it. So yeah, I agree. Like I don't know. Like, I know for sure that next year he's going to go do a play. He's going to do Waiting for Godot, and I think on somewhere in Manhattan, maybe Broadway, off Broadway. I'm not sure exactly what theater, but that's going to happen, and that's going to be a long break, which we would like, because we'll be done with the record, and then they need to build. The management needs to get it going, the art, and that'll take months and months and stuff. And after 2.5 years, 105 shows, I think we all would like just to take a little time, with our but Keanu, he doesn't, he just keeps going, I don't think I've ever seen him ever like go to a beach and just lay on the beach. He's just constantly, if he did, he'd be going to like a motorcycle race, or he would attach it to something. So he just loves working, and whether it's the motorcycles or the music or the acting, and he's what sort of makes him so dynamic, because he's constantly doing that. And Brett's very committed too. He's a great, his guitar playing is so good. I mean, it's just one guy, and he just sounds the way his rig is set up, it just sounds so full, and I just love his sound. It's very 80s. He has an old Marshall amp from the 80s, with a matchless combined, and Keanu's got a Gallon Kruger. So like they're very much tech gearheads, and I have the same drum set I've had since 1992.
You got Zildjians?
So
you got Zildjians?
I do. I have a DW drum set, and for years I sort of mix and match cymbals. Cymbals are like the hardest, you never really, the drums are easy. I have the same drum set for 25 years, but cymbals are the one. So I've had the same Zildjian ride since 1991. But the 2 crash cymbals, I've flip-flopped all over the place, pasty, this, that, but I finally found the ones I love, and they're Zildjian's paper-thin crashes, and they just sound so good. I have like a 19 and a 20, and then the Zildjian Sweet Ride hi-hats, which they're new. So this guy Eric at Zildjian he's helped me out a lot, and we found a good setup. So yeah, I love I love all that gear talk. Gear talk.
Got one final question for you.
Nerdy gear talk.
Yes, I always wish I could get it. It's why I interviewed Snake Sabo from Skid Row, and he had a guitar that was just named after him, like one of the Martin or Fender, whatever. And I made the mistake of asking him, about the guitar, and he went into like this really intense 15 minutes of how the guitar, and it fascinated me, but I had no idea what he was talking about, because he's like talking about this. My one friend who plays guitar is like, that was awesome. He was talking about this. And I'm like, I had no idea, because he's talking about this and then the boo. And I'm like, yeah. So I got one last question for you. You're a happily married guy. You go to the Hollywood Bowl with your dog. You're a foodie. You've had a successful acting career. You're a successful musician. Looking back, what are one or two things that you're most proud of in your life that you've accomplished, that just something that you go, this is pretty awesome?
The friends that I've made along the way. Yeah, I would have to say that. The friends that I've made along the way, and the relationships that I've made. I think that's it. When I think at the end of your life, when you're laying on your deathbed, you're not thinking about, all the other stuff. You're just thinking about the relationships you had, with the people that came into your life. And I think, I'm just really proud that I've been lucky to be able to be surrounded by all that much love.
I'm thinking you've hung out with Lisa Tomani and Mike Ivey, both who I know. So it's a small
love Mike
world.
Ivey.
Anyway,
Mike's a sweet man.
He is. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. You're not on Twitter anymore. You're on Instagram. What is it, Dogstar on Instagram, or what's your Instagram?
Dogstar Band, at Dogstar Band, and for the Dogstar, on Instagram, and I'm on there too at Mailhouse, When we come back to Philly, we gotta hook up, and you gotta come to the show. If we go back, it'd probably be 2026 by then.
Well, yeah, and as I said, Joanne loves it because her birthday, the day, I think she's a year or two older than Keanu, is the same day. So she was all excited because they're both September 2nd. She's like, Keanu's my birthday buddy. I'm like, hey, mine's Henry Winkler. So I got the Fonz. So anyway,
he's the best.
People, you got to check out. Go buy Dogstar's music. Go listen to Dogstar's music. Go look up Rob Mailhouse. He's got that. What's that Christmas movie called? You with Melissa Gilbert?
My goodness. I think it's a Christmas pageant. I don't even know if that airs anymore.
One time I'm driving. I'm listening to Philadelphia
Sports.
Well,
how lucky am I to be able to hang out with Melissa Gilbert for a couple of weeks? And she was, my God, she was the most generous, loving, giving actor I've ever worked with.
After I think we became friends on Facebook, I'm driving and listening to Philadelphia Sports Radio, and there's this guy talking about that movie, and I was like, holy crap, I think I tweeted at him. I said, I know the dude in that movie. And he was saying how he loved it. So people, go look it up. Melissa Gilbert and Rob Mailhouse. Go look up, get him some residual checks. Go look up Seinfeld when he plays the beard. That's, so you see him in a lot of stuff. So look up Rob Mailhouse and go watch his stuff, because you'll get some residual money. Maybe, I don't know how big residuals are anymore, but you go.
I could go out and get a cheeseburger.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
At Jack in the Box. It's on sale. And people, go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 1,025 episodes there. You can email me at coopertalk.net. Go to YouTube. Look up Coop's Comedy Corner. I have some really great comics coming on. We talk about the industry. I've had Steve Scrovan, who's won Emmys for Everyone Loves Raymond. I actually had my two friends, Reed Diamond and Kyle Secor, because they're not comedians, but Homicide Laugh in the Streets, they have a podcast. I've had Jimmy Schubert on. I just had, what did I have on tonight? Larry Ambrose, great writer. So it's good if you like the industry. Wonderful Wendy Liebman's been on. Also, go look on YouTube, The Coop Tank.
Oh, Wendy's great.
She's the best. And The Coop Tank is my local business podcast. I do a roundtable of 3 South Jersey and Philly business people. So go and check that all out. And you all have a great day. Remember, listen to Dogstar, and when they come to town, go see them, and then send Rob a message on the best food in your town, and he'll go there. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.